Hi, everyone, and thanks for being here. I'm Esther de las Casas, Communications Lead at Ment Abacus. Last week, we started a conversation about why learning breaks down when everything is treated as equally important, and why front-loading, structure, and deliberate slowness matter more than we usually think. Today, we simply continue that voice. In Part 2, the focus shifts to where slowness actually belongs. Not everywhere, but right at the frontier, where foundations are formed and where later decisions quietly depend on what is truly anchored. Dan was supposed to join today, but he's currently outside shoveling snow in front of the house. We did try to outsource the job this winter. No luck. Apparently, finding someone willing to remove snow around here is impossible. From nothing comes nothing isn't a very popular saying these days. Anyway, so here I am again, reading Dan's piece to you. The title of today's article is Why Slowness at the Frontier is the Hidden Advantage in Learning. Imagine building a house. There are thousands of elements involved: bricks, cables, pipes, tiles, fixtures, but only a few components actually carry the load. If those cornerstones are weak, everything that follows becomes fragile, no matter how carefully the details are added later. Learning works in much the same way. One of the core problems in modern education is not a lack of effort or motivation, but misallocated speed. We rush through foundations and then wonder why advanced knowledge does not hold. We optimize for coverage instead of stability. Slowness, in this sense, is not inefficiency. It is a precision strategy when applied at the right points. Across domains, knowledge is not evenly distributed in importance. The Pareto principle, often cited as 20% of inputs yielding 80% of the outcome, is helpful here as a metaphor. Not as a strict mathematical rule, but as a lens that allows us to distinguish between elements that merely add detail and those that actually carry structure. Language offers a clear example. There is extensive statistical research showing that a relatively small set of words, often the most common 100 to 300, accounts for the majority of everyday communication. The same applies to grammar, for example, in the English language. A few basic structures appear constantly, while many sophisticated constructions are rare edge cases. Learning words like I, you, is, if, or then provides enormous expressive leverage. Understanding core structures such as the zero conditional or the difference between present simple and present continuous gives access to a large part of how the language actually functions. By contrast, highly specialized vocabulary or rare grammatical constructions add far less, at least early on. This is not a judgment of value. It is a statement about load-bearing function. English grammar here is only an example. The same structural logic applies to any domain of knowledge. Importantly, what counts as cornerstone knowledge is not fixed. Statistical analysis can help identify typical load-bearing elements in a domain, but their relevance depends on where a learner stands. What feels foundational to a beginner may seem trivial to an expert, while advanced concepts can become new cornerstones at later stages. In that sense, cornerstone knowledge always emerges at the frontier of understanding, the next unit that reorients how everything else is seen from a given perspective. In law, economics, engineering, and medicine, we rely on foundational principles, the basic assumptions and structures upon which more advanced reasoning depends. Conceptually, these are often referred to as first principles. This leads to a key point. Cornerstone knowledge must be learned differently from everything else. Speed may sometimes work well for peripheral information, but it works poorly for foundations. Foundational knowledge does not merely add information, it reconfigures orientation. It shapes how we interpret, categorize, and prioritize new inputs. If first principles are shaky, every additional layer increases confusion rather than competence. This is why slowness matters, but only locally. We do not need to learn everything slowly. We need to be deliberately slow where mistakes are expensive. We often think we have grasped something, while the brain has not yet evaluated how important it truly is. This momentary feeling of understanding can be misleading. The information enters the mind competing on equal footing with inputs that are hierarchically far less important. Without deliberate slowness, we risk a familiar pattern. Understood everything, remembered nothing. Slowness gives the mind time not only to understand, but to decide. This matters. This is foundational. This is worth keeping. Slowness at the foundations allows knowledge to move from exposure to possession. This is also why diagrams matter so much. Words are sequential, but diagrams are structural. When we see a diagram, we do not just read information, we perceive relationships such as hierarchy, dependency, symmetry, and contrast. The brain is exceptionally good at processing spatial structure. That is why well-designed diagrams often outperform long explanations. They reduce cognitive load while increasing clarity. In many domains, the most important task is not to memorize content, but to build an internal map, a mental architecture that allows new information to find its place. At this point, a crucial distinction emerges between knowing and owning. There is knowledge we can recognize when prompted, and there is knowledge we can use when it matters. The latter is what enables action in situations without notes, screens, or assistance, whether in a boardroom discussion, a complex negotiation, an oral examination, or a moment of leadership under pressure. In such situations, access is not enough. What matters is availability and a deeply anchored understanding of first principles. This is why foundational knowledge must be anchored deeply, ideally through multiple channels at once: visual, spatial, tactile, and conceptual. The more dimensions involved, the more resilient the memory becomes. Approaches that deliberately slow down this anchoring process, by making structure visible, by forcing prioritization, by engaging more than one sense, are not inefficient. They are targeted. The ment abacus approach embodies this logic. By placing information into external grids, tied to stories and coded spatial placement, it forces deliberate multisensory anchoring. It acts as a minimally invasive precision instrument. Intellectually, we may understand that a given unit is foundational, but presenting it in a way the nervous system itself recognizes makes all the difference. Through deliberate slowness, spatial structure, and embodied engagement, the body-mind system receives a clear signal. This is frontier material, and this is worth deep anchoring. So the question is not how much information we can process. Perhaps the more important question is, what deserves to become part of our internal structure? Which principles are worth owning rather than merely accessing, and where slowness is not a cost but an investment? This will matter even more as information becomes cheaper, faster, and more abundant. Let me end this piece with two questions. If your laptop and notes were gone right now, how much of your foundation would still be anchored in your own body-mind system and available instantly? Are your first principles so deeply grounded that you can naturally develop solutions, describe scenarios, and structure the overflow of available information? And that was today's piece. Before we wrap up, a quick update from outside. Dan has just finished shoveling the snow. I'm now wondering whether he's still planning to go to the gym today. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's piece, and I'm curious to see what he'll prepare for next week. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your Sunday. And remember, as Dan always says, learning isn't a trend. Structure still works. Square, not hip.
Every story needs structure. Every mind needs a map. Ment Abacus. Square, not hip. Visit us at mentabacus.com.